Your partner comes into the room and you're like more excited to see, your plate of food than your attractive partner. And you're like, I'm more attracted to this, bowl of cereal for some reason, that kind of situation.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Talks, the podcast that brings you real strategies for sustainable fitness transformation. Let me say that one word one more time. Sustainable. It's one of our key pillars, sustainable. So today we're actually going to talk about the flip side of that, which is lack of sustainability through the lens of nutrition and diet. The key question we are tackling today is your diet unsustainable? We're going to walk through some of the key signs to help you identify whether or not your diet is sustainable for you and how you can start to integrate more sustainability in your dieting moving forward. So we are going to get quite practical with this one, hoping that there's some little bits and tidbits along the way that you feel you relate to, whether because you've been struggling to find sustainability or to celebrate some of the success you have had with your own diet sustainability. Paris, is your diet unsustainable?
I think it's pretty sustainable. I find it pretty easy to stick to my diet for the most part. But I think first, maybe we can say, what do we mean by sustainable? Maybe even just to start it off. My personal view on sustainability is something that you can sustain over, extended time frame. So something that is reasonable for you to adhere to with limited struggle or limited friction for an extended time frame. You want to build on that?
No, I think that's absolutely clutch, right? Just knowing that sustainability is the thing that you can do day in and day out for an extended period of time. And there are going to be instances, I think, as well, where once in a while, extreme circumstances, you don't take the most sustainable approach. But I would say 99% of people, and for everybody, 95% of the time, you need to do the thing that you can do repeatedly. That's actually just essential for developing a lifestyle. So if you're somebody who's looking to lead a healthy lifestyle or have a fitness-based lifestyle, you need to have something sustainable, because sustainability and lifestyle go hand in hand. If something is repeatedly done for an extended period of time, it becomes part of your lifestyle.
Absolutely. That's so true. And maybe something to start with, apart from the definition, I think is what sometimes people think is unsustainable when they first start their fitness journey taking becomes sustainable for the main reason of you just get better at this stuff and you get better at building systems. And a lot of times what starting, taking your fitness journey more seriously actually does is it pokes holes in the inefficiencies and the lack of systems that you have in your life at the moment. Because in order for you to really stay on top of your nutrition, hit your workouts, get your sleep in, and manage everything else you got going in your life, there's a certain amount of skills that you need, including time management, critical thinking, planning, prioritization, those kind of things. So a lot of times when we start a fitness journey, we say, oh, wow, this is so hard. I'm really struggling to keep on top of it. It's just because you don't have those skill sets developed yet, which is okay. But eventually, once you build those skill sets, guess what? You've taken something that might have felt unsustainable and turned it into something that is sustainable.
Right. And so today's signs that we're going to talk about are going to show you the things that actually are worth worrying about as, okay, this might be an unsustainable practice versus, okay, this is just hard. And you just outlined the clear difference. Something being a little bit challenging isn't the same as causing friction forever. So you have to get over that original hump of challenge and effort that's required. But then that seamless integration, again, part of your original definition was for the long term. So the things that you're from one day to the next doesn't feel sustainable, it's the wrong time horizon. You need to be thinking about, is this something that I can sustain for the long term? And that applies both to, okay, this is actually feeling really hard right now because I'm new at it. It also applies to, oh, this is so easy. I just do this thing. But can you do that thing forever?
Or very extended time frames, right?
Yes, exactly. Is there anything else you want to talk about from the definition of sustainability perspective?
I don't think so. I think maybe we'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, but it's just having seasons of your life, and sometimes a certain protocol, especially with nutrition, could be unsustainable for the season of life that you're in. And maybe in another season, it would be easy for adherence, right? Let's say you were traveling twice a week, flying, and then you were barely sleeping, you were changing time zones, you had this major projects at work you were working on, also trying to take care of the kids, and you were moving all in time frame. It's okay, maybe a certain nutrition protocol or a certain level of adherence with nutrition might be unsustainable in that season of life, doesn't mean that it's unsustainable. It just means unsustainable in the context. So also kind of acknowledging like different seasons and what is sustainable in each season.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And hopefully some of the tips that we're about to share can be applied in season and at large, I think, because they're the things that you can say, like, right now, is this something that's going to cause challenges for sustainability? And so I think the same rules will apply to both those, but it's such an important piece of context for people to understand. It's like, just because you can't do something now doesn't mean you'll never be able to do it. And I think that's a really empowering thought too. It also helps you understand better the concept of timing, because we always say, or the fitness people in the world always say, there's never a right time to start. Sometimes there is a wrong time to do something, though. There are times that are better or less better. Being able to understand, like, right now, this is not sustainable for me because of XYZ. But you're giving yourself a rationale. You're able to say, okay, it's because I'm seeing these signs happen to me. It's not because you're just saying, oh, well, I'm just busy. I know we just talked a lot about, like, the concept of sustainability and how all the signs that we're going to talk about are going to help you understand it better. Promise we're going to get there. But before we get there, I do want to clarify a little bit around the other side of the title of this episode. So, title is Your Diet Unsustainable? We just talked about sustainability and some important caveats and context around that subject. The other piece is diet. And so when we say diet, right off the bat, I want to make sure that we are clear that there are kind of two definitions of diet here that we're going to tap into. The first is the actual definition of diet, which is the overarching food consumption patterns. So what you eat, how much you eat, why you eat, all of those things are part of your diet. And that doesn't matter what calories you're taking in or all of that. For the purpose of one definition of the word diet, it's just the food you consume. Now, the second definition of diet, I think, is the one that colloquially we've become more accustomed to, which is associated with a little bit of restriction, with calorie deficits, with fat loss phases, weight loss, all of that. So that is a different yet related definition of diet. And we're going to touch on both of them in different ways. We're going to talk about major themes across the board that affect your diet, regardless of whether or not you're in a fat loss phase, but then also allude to some of the nuances around sustainable fat loss dieting.
Sounds awesome. Yeah.
Anything else you want to clarify on the terminology around?
No, I'm glad you made that distinction, actually, because a lot of times when people say, like, I'm on a diet, we need to, like, clarify what we mean, because we can use that term in different ways. So it's important that we give that context first.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we talked about the definitions of sustainability. We talked about our applications of the word diet for today. Why does a sustainable diet even matter?
I think it's because we all know this inherently, but then we refuse to kind of believe it in action, is that things do take time. And, classic Rome wasn't built in a day, or nothing good happens overnight type thing. If we do want to see actual results, I'm sorry, but it's going to take you doing the things for an extended period of time, which means that in order to do things for an extended period of time, we need good adherence. And if we need good adherence, it needs to be approachable and sustainable.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't have said it better than that. This idea that sustainability is the thing that gives you the result to begin with. So if you are chasing a result, and that result, again, doesn't have to be fat loss, right? Mm-hmm. It's anything to do with your diet. That could just be eating foods you love. That could be staying well fueled. That could be health-oriented outcomes, right? Regardless of what it is, if you want to see the outcome or the output, you need that sustainable approach to do the thing for long enough to get you there. I also strongly have this belief that the time you put into something is also related to the time you get out of it. It's not just about, like, getting to that result that needs to be sustainable, but it's maintaining it. So if you take let's just say, an unsustainable approach to your nutrition, and then you are on pace to achieve a certain outcome, you get there, what happens after? You also need sustainability to sustain that outcome or that result. So in order to kind of continue past that one checking point or checkpoint, you need to have a
so true. And people forget about that part, because if you actually look at a lot of data, like, people are not that bad at losing weight, but they really suck at keeping it off. It's like, we need to think about sustainability as part of, like, habit adoption and mindset adoption and belief system adoption, we'll call it. Not only for the achieving a specific goal in itself, but as you said, like, in the I'm going to keep the results that I achieved phase, which is kind of forever. And it's like, okay, well, how do I make that sustainable too? And what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges people actually have with their personal fitness. So, signs of an unsustainable diet. I feel like you and I are going to riff on this one for a little bit. We'll just kind of go back and forth. But I want you to start off with a couple of the signs that you see most prominently that could indicate to somebody that their diet strategy or diet in any way, shape, or form right now is unsustainable.
The first one that comes to mind is if you are constantly messing up. Like, for example, if every weekend you're messing up, meaning like you're not adhering to, yeah, air quotes, messing up, like every 3 days or every weekend, like you stick to it for a few days and then, you just can't do it. And then you binge, or you go out and party way too much and then have pizza and then you feel bad about it. And then you lock in again for a week, but then a few days and you can't, deal with it anymore. And then, that kind of cycle, if you find yourself in that cycle, that's a key sign that like the protocol you're using isn't sustainable. Or if you're like really looking towards when it's going to end and you hear that it's like, oh, I can't wait for this diet to end so I can go back to eating back to normal. First things first is people with that mindset always end up, I hate to say it, but ballooning back up to where they started after when we're talking about fat loss diets, always, if you have that mindset. But if you're constantly thinking of when is this going to end, probably means the protocol you're doing is not sustainable for you. Yeah.
Okay, you kind of gave us a two in one, so I want to break them down because both of them have so much merit. The first one was, I'm going to just summarize by saying yo-yoing, right? This idea of like, if you feel like you're constantly messing up, first of all, what a demoralizing mindset to carry with you, right? Like, how are you going to be empowered to actually keep going when you keep feeling like, oh, I messed up, oh, I messed up, I messed up? You're yo-yoing. It's great if you can get back on track, but if that only lasts so long and you end up in that yo-yo cycle, that by definition is unsustainable. It's also important to recognize when you say, oh, I messed up, what are you messing up on? Like, and doing that reflection and being able to say, why are you quote unquote messing up? Because you're probably just giving yourself some sort of like guidelines or restrictions or rules within that protocol that are making it too easy for you to mess up.
I like that.
So that was your first one, right? Like you're yo-yoing, and just making sure that like if you're constantly feeling as if you messed up or got off track, then that is sign number one, probably not a sustainable approach. The other one I heard you talk about was anticipating an end.
Glorifying, almost like glorifying.
I love glorifying the end. Definitely a sign that it is unsustainable. Anything else you want to add on that before I add in my 2 cents? Because I wanted to pull that one apart because I think there's so much validity to it.
I think, hey, I'm all for like celebrating checkpoints, but I always tell our clients, think of it as a checkpoint rather than starting finish line. There's no finish line. We're playing an infinite game. I've talked about that before on the podcast, I think. It is an infinite game, so you can get excited about checkpoints and give yourself a pat in the back and celebrate. I'm all for that. But I'm not for glorifying an endpoint where all of a sudden the handcuffs are off. It's like, I'm doing this sucky thing where I'm doing this diet that sucks and, well, poor me, and I have these handcuffs on, but I can't wait till they get off so I can go roam around and have freedom,
Also, like, what a terrible way to feel empowered in your fitness journey when the things that are leading you closer to quote unquote progress are miserable. Not cool at all. I mean, it's supposed to be a journey for a reason, right? But I really like that you brought that one up because this sense of ending and finite is really antithetical to the idea of self-improvement and this continuous self-improvement. And I also think that if you think about all of the, let's just call it surface level research or evidence around happiness, like happiness also isn't a state that you just achieve. It's not like I get to this point like I've achieved happiness, I'm so content with my life now. Like that just doesn't happen. And I think we can translate that into our fitness journeys too, right? Like a lot of people will say, okay, yeah, I lost that 10 pounds I wanted, or like, wow, I've finally deadlifted 325 or whatever. Is that the thing that makes you happy? No. Like, and so deriving joy or satisfaction from the process is also key for sustainability. So if you're not experiencing that, you're not going to keep going. We don't do things we don't want to do.
And I really like that you said that. I'll build on that by saying in life, what I've recently tried to do is stop chasing happiness and start chasing purpose instead, because purpose is something that is continual and it doesn't put like a certain emotional state on like a pedestal. And there's a lot of outside interactions that can affect how quote unquote happy you feel at any given moment or any given day. but you're kind of in charge of how much purpose you want to have in your life in some way, shape, or form. And as long as you do have purpose, there is like a sense of optimism and hope almost for better tomorrows, I will call it. So that's something that I've shifted to a lot, is like focusing on creating more purpose rather than focus on like achieving happiness as a state. Not to get more philosophical here, but yeah, go ahead.
We have to. I think it's part of our identity. We love the philosophical stuff, the deep meaning in this journey. But let's
Yeah.
bring it back to the nutrition side of things, right? If you are really dreading every meal that you quote unquote have to or are about to eat, your diet is probably unsustainable. And I would say that's true regardless of whether it's a fat loss definition of the diet or
Yeah.
a just everyday food consumption. If you are choosing to live your life, and it doesn't matter if you have a fat loss goal or not, if you are choosing to pursue food choices that make you miserable, that is not a sustainable way for long-term nutrition. Those are great examples of dietary patterns that are unsustainable. That yo-yo cycle, just the sense that I keep messing up and that I can't wait for it to end. So if you are somebody who has experienced either of those mindsets, it could be an indicator that some of the strategies you're trying just aren't going to be sustainable for you. Those are excellent examples of patterns, but I also want to talk about some of the more subjective feelings that you might experience during an unsustainable diet. That could be more subtle indicators of whether or not this is going to help you look and feel your best moving forward. And the first one I want to touch on here is hunger levels. And this is going to be different with our two different definitions of diet. Because if you think about diet as just the culmination of your nutrition related or food related decisions, you shouldn't be always hungry all the time. So if you are constantly feeling hungry, then that could be a red flag that something's not sustainable. Because in that case, if you're not pursuing a fat loss goal, you're just trying to kind of sustain overall health and your body's constantly telling you that it's hungry, chances are you're under fueling or you're making food decisions that aren't effectively helping you
manage your appetite. Or you're trying to like sustain an unrealistically lean body composition, for example, which is influenced largely through diet as well. So yeah, you're so right. You're so right. If you are constantly hungry, and unless like there's a specific context that's not supposed to be sustainable anyways, like getting elite levels of leanness, or like the tail end of a fat loss phase when you're making a push, like there are some points in fat loss where it's supposed to be unsustainable.
Yeah, of course. Because you're trying to provoke a certain adaptation. You're trying to make a rapid change, right? Or not rapid, but a profound change. And that's also why I want to split apart this like diet, everyday diet from fat loss diet, right? Because the diet, everyday diet, you shouldn't be, if you are, of course, we go through phases of hunger over the course of a day. Like I'm more hungry at certain times of day, or like that's totally normal. But if you're at that point where you are struggling to distinguish your appetite cues from, wow, I'm actually hungry and my baseline is hungry, that's problematic. But to your point, the fat loss side of things, accepting a certain level of hunger is normal. But I would also say that there is a certain amount of hunger in a fat loss phase that is unsustainable. Do you have any perspective on that?
The tough thing is like, okay, first there's a lot of tools and strategies that you can use. We can do a whole other podcast on just hunger management. There's a lot of strategies to use and a lot of things to think about in order to effectively manage appetite throughout a fat loss phase. However, I will say there's also some individual variation. Some people, like their body almost recognizes a calorie deficit as like more or less of an attack on survival than other people. Like some people, they will go like 6 months of getting very lean and they won't even be hungry once, maybe for one day. And then somebody else, like immediately they could be at a higher body fat percentage and they're like 7 out of 10 hungry. So that's something to think about. But typically, on average, for most people, if you are like over 7.5, 8 out of 10 consistently in terms of hunger, you're probably going too low in the calories or don't have like certain other systems in check, that help with appetite control, like food selection, meal timing, like those types of things.
What you're saying there about needing to have strategies in place to manage hunger is what brings that element of sustainability, right? So if your diet is causing, your fat loss diet in this context is causing extreme levels of hunger, it is a sign that what you're doing might be unsustainable for two reasons. One is you don't have those strategies and skills in place to diet effectively and to maintain a calorie deficit effectively. So I would say that counts as unsustainable. Or the other thing is that if you are feeling that extreme level of hunger, then you might have done something too drastic. Maybe it is too low in calories. Maybe it is just, you made a very
Mhm.
rapid change versus where your body was operating before, and that's probably not sustainable. And in both those circumstances, you're less likely to adhere to your fat loss diet, because at a certain point, if hunger is not manageable, it makes it a lot harder to make the decisions that are aligned
Yes.
with adherence.
Good point. Very good point.
Yeah. Okay, so that was one of the sensations I think that you can feel maybe as an indicator of lack of sustainability with your diet, hunger. The other one is related to hunger, but not the same thing. So I want to talk about it. Is this sense of
Mhm.
lethargy, or in plainer terms, constant fatigue. How do you see that playing a role, in an everyday diet or a fat loss diet?
Yeah, so it's funny because there's so many things that can impact like fatigue management, but talking about diet specifically, again, if you're just your everyday kind of baseline diet of like this is how I eat type situation, you should feel pretty damn good, right? Like your battery should be pretty full. But again, there's a lot of lifestyle variables that can also influence like how revved up we are to go. But if we're just talking in the context of diet, like it shouldn't be a diet induced feeling of that lazy kind of feeling. It shouldn't be necessarily diet induced if it's like your baseline normal eating. If you're in a fat loss phase, you should expect maybe like 80% of your usual battery in terms of energy. And if you're getting like exotically lean, we'll call it, then sometimes 50% or less is normal, in those types of scenarios. But for most people on a normal fat loss diet, some people will actually get more energy because their body's getting healthier. If they're going from like maybe we'll say less medically healthy body fat percentage to a healthy body fat percentage, your battery will actually increase. You'll go 150% of your baseline. But if you're going from like a normal body fat
True.
percentage to maybe like lean, then temporarily you'll probably find yourself at like 8 out of 10 compared to your usual battery.
Being aware of it is probably where it starts, is like checking in with yourself and saying like, okay, what would I expect from in a fat loss phase in terms of my operating battery versus my everyday. If my everyday battery feels like it's in the red zone, or I have to put myself on low power mode in order to keep going throughout my day, and I don't have a fat loss goal, I'm just looking for
Mm-hmm.
sustainable diet, that's probably a sign. If I've then gone through and evaluated other lifestyle variables, and like how's my sleep, how's my mood, are there stressors in my life, all of those things, but I'm still feeling very low battery, then maybe consider thinking about, are my dietary choices sustaining an energy
Mm-hmm.
level that I need
Yeah.
to get throughout my day? Cool. Okay, there is one more indicator of an unsustainable diet that I really want to touch on that I don't think many people think about. But for me, this is important because it's something that I've personally grappled with in the past, and I think cannot go understated. Food
Yes.
focus. This idea of always thinking about food. And don't get me wrong, I love food. I think about food a lot because it's a source of creativity for me. It brings me joy, all those things. But if you cannot stop thinking about food, or like you're in the middle of an important meeting at work and you're going like, oh my God, what am I going to have for lunch today? Or when I get home, I can't wait to eat this dinner. Like, it might be an indicator that you're somehow craving more from your
Mm-hmm.
diet
Mm-hmm.
than you're getting. Does that make sense to you? Do you relate to that?
We're talking about a trio that typically happens. You have some of these kind of diet symptoms, we'll call it, quote unquote, throughout a fat loss diet. But baseline diet, we'll separate it into two. You should be thinking about, ooh, I wonder if there's tacos at home, like stuff like that. Like, those kind of weird things are like you wake up in the morning, you're like, I can't wait to eat my dinner. Like, like those kind of things, which a lot of people could probably relate to. It's good to be excited and like what you eat,
Probably.
but like you shouldn't be like that excited. Or if like, your partner comes into the room and you're like more excited to see, your plate of food than your attractive partner. And you're like, I'm more attracted to this, bowl of cereal for some reason, that kind of situation, then, okay, the food focus is too high. So
Yeah.
again, normal baseline diet, you should not be thinking weird things like that. Fat loss diet, on most people's fat loss diet, you also shouldn't be. Usually it's a sign that, yeah, same reasons as before, deficit's too big, or like your hormones like leptin and ghrelin are a little bit funky, which can happen at certain points when you're trying to get lean.
I want to bring it back to just why it's unsustainable, because that overt food focus, regardless of whether it's your baseline or you're in a fat loss phase, is an indicator that you're not getting
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
sufficiency, I think, from your diet, which becomes unsustainable for two reasons. One is because if your consumption, and when we talk about consumption, it could be calories, it could be protein, it could be micronutrients, right, is insufficient, then you cannot operate at your best, and you cannot continue to operate at that
Mm-hmm.
level for an extended period of time. That's just a reality. So like one of the reasons you might be overly food focused is because you don't have breakfast or lunch and you're only waiting till dinner. And that is a problematic pattern, regardless of whether you're maintaining a baseline day to day or you're in a fat loss phase. So that is a sign of insufficient fueling across the day. So that's why food focus can be unsustainable. The other reason it can be unsustainable is because it interferes with other aspects of your life that you need to keep going at. It can interfere with work, as you said, relationships. It can interfere with your mental focus on other tasks. It just becomes very important to say, like, part of why it's unsustainable is that interference
Absolutely,
factor.
absolutely. And sometimes, like, again, in the context of getting really lean, even when you, let's say, you bring calories up and you're eating sufficiently, sometimes it just takes a little bit of, like, time is a variable that people don't talk about. Even if you are reaching sufficiency in terms of your intake and you're checking all the right boxes, sometimes it does take a certain period of time for you to get back to like a normal level of food focus. For example, if you're recovering from like getting exotically lean. So it's funny because it's almost like we have three different contexts. The first is baseline eating, normal lifestyle eating. Second is like a normal fat loss phase, and then there's like trying to get very lean type phase, and each of those kind of have their nuances. But I think we've covered it decently well so far, I hope.
Yeah, I think so. And I think at the end of the day, it's just an important reminder that you have to know what's quote unquote
Yes.
normal for
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
in that context. For you as an individual, based on your standard baseline, and then in each of those three contexts, what would you expect to happen to your individual baseline on each of these measures, whether that's hunger, lethargy, or food focus? I probably am somebody who experiences more food focus as the baseline norm. I'm okay with that because it doesn't interfere with my life. In fact, I find it enhances my life because it's what I do. So I'm okay with that higher level because I know it's part of my baseline. And I know it's going to go up when I go into a fat loss phase. Again, I'm okay with that. But if you're somebody who doesn't usually have that baseline level of food focus, or in the past didn't really care too much about what you eat, that could be a red flag for you. So you do have to know your individual context and the context of your current state,
I
current
like
phase,
it.
or
Yes,
goals.
and that comes to self awareness. Yeah. Yeah.
At 100% self awareness. Oh my God. I feel like every episode is just
it's
self awareness in disguise of
It's
a
so
different
true.
question.
I mean, it's one of the big, like we talked a lot about skills in like the opening discussion, and I was kind of saying, okay, you need all these different skills, and when you take your fitness goals seriously, it pokes holes in it, but it also pokes holes on some certain attributes that you don't have developed, and that's why fitness is like one of the ultimate
Yeah.
forms of self development because it just pokes holes in inefficiencies, character traits that are not developed, skill sets that are not developed. It's really kind of like very a transparent view on yourself.
That's why it is a continuous process, right? Because we're constantly learning more about ourselves along the way. Okay, so I guess this is going to be a slightly longer episode, so I want to make sure we have some practical takeaways too. As a quick checkpoint of where we're at so far in the discussion, we've covered 2 dietary patterns that are indicators of a lack of sustainability in your diet. We've also talked about 3, let's say, more acute symptoms: hunger, lethargy, food focus. I also want to talk about
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle indicators of sustainability because, like we said a million times over, sustainability is that long term integration into your lifestyle. So, if your lifestyle is pushing back at your dietary choices, that could be a sign that it's not sustainable. What is the first lifestyle indicator that comes to mind for you?
That's a tough one because I do think a lot of times it's just building mindsets and skills that allow it to become sustainable, even with the same given lifestyle. But maybe like a perception of I can't, have social outings or something like that, or like you stop going to see your friends, or you stop seeing people, or you stop talking to people at lunch at your work. Like I guess behaviors like that, like self isolation, more self isolation behaviors rather than asking yourself the question of like how can I still integrate the food choices and way of eating that I want into my lifestyle that I prefer, if that makes sense.
Yes, that was
Okay.
the one I had in the back of my mind that I was
Okay.
secretly hoping you were going to go for, which is the social context. If you can never have dinner with your mom ever again, not sustainable. Should not be sustainable. If you are turning inwards from your closest friends, not sustainable. If you do not know how to engage effectively with an important work dinner where you're building valuable connections and networking, again, that's an issue. So I think just understanding that the social piece can or cannot be sustainable. But it goes back to what you said, it's depending on skills. Like you do need to invest the time to build the skills to navigate different social circumstances to keep your goals in mind. But if you're constantly feeling that sense of withdrawal from social situations, then your diet probably is not sustainable, regardless if we're talking baseline diet, fat loss diet, any other sort of diet out there. If it's leading to social isolation, it's not sustainable.
Important.
Very important. Very, very important. Okie dokie. So I can't believe I just said okie dokie on the podcast. Well then,
Okie dokie,
moving
Smokey.
forward. Okie dokie, Smokey.
Tell me you're Canadian without telling me you're Canadian. Okie dokie, Smokey. What are we talking about on this podcast? Anyways.
So we've talked now about dietary patterns that are unsustainable, 3 acute symptoms of a lack of sustainable diet, and the importance of lifestyle integration when it comes to being social as an indicator of whether something's sustainable or not for you. If we had to rapid fire, let's say 2 to 3 things to keep in mind for building a sustainable diet, what are some practical takeaways that we want people to remember? So we've talked about, these are all indicators that something isn't right in terms of sustainability. What can you do to start rectifying those red flags or addressing those red flags?
Yeah. There's so many layers to this conversation. I think we've done decent so far, but it's like, it's so many different layers. I think it's more so, I like to think about your diet. You got to start by building the blueprint for your diet. And I like to look at the skeleton that your life has already given you and then create your nutrition strategy on top of that. And like, you actually start with the skeleton of your schedule and your responsibilities, and then you weave your nutrition strategy into that based on logic and based on like system integration. So it's not like this is the diet I have to stick to. Everything else, like, we'll figure it out. It's more like, here's how my life looks like. Now let's then focus on like what is the best integration strategy using systems, skills, and behaviors to then be able to like form those as one in unity.
Your blueprint as your plan, and not trying to just fit a plan into your life, but using your life as the foundation for your plan. I love that so much, because that to me is the definition of a sustainable nutrition approach right there, is one that is designed for your life. It's like if you're a housing developer, right? And you're like, I'm going to build this random house and I'm going to see what plot of land I can put it on top. Probably not going to go too well. You're either going to squash another building, squash some people, knock down a few trees, or end up with half the house falling apart. But if you buy your plot of land first, you can design the house that's perfectly suited for that. You'll get a beautiful backyard out of it, and you'll end up, thriving forever in the foundations of that house, right? You said blueprint, so I went there. But I think it's so important to keep that in mind, is like your structure first, your lifestyle blueprint.
Exactly. And that's why I think people a lot of times just have it the opposite. And I think like taking that, and it might take a little bit of thought at the beginning, but once you set yourself up, then it's easy to tweak it as you go.
And I think it's about having the skills, right? We've said this so many times over the course of this podcast, but like, I know that this as our practical strategy takeaway for today's episode, it might sound a little convoluted to some people listening, being like, well, how the heck do I start to do that? The first step is actually just acknowledging, okay, what does your current life look like? How is it currently organized? What are your current responsibilities? That's the outline of your blueprint. And then you may need some guidance, or may need to give yourself time to figure out what those strategies are to tackle each of those responsibilities within that blueprint. And you don't hesitate to engage with the trial and error of that, and focus on what skills do I need to build. Because if you start there, then the lifestyle integration will follow, because it becomes habitual. If you're just relying on executing a plan alone, that's probably not going to last.
Cool discussions today.
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like that wraps it up really nicely. Just leaving behind this imagery of the blueprint as your life, and your nutrition plan and protocol as what you build on top of it.
I like it.
So we are hopefully leaving you with some ideas on what makes a sustainable diet, and some of the red flags that might help you spot whether or not your diet is sustainable. Sustainability is always at the heart of what we do within our coaching model. We know it takes time to build up, but it has proven to us time and time again, working with different clients, that it is the approach that becomes not only the most fulfilling, but the most likely to last for the long term. And we do take a lot of pride in those approaches that are built to last, and really partnering with people to help them get those long-term results. So if you are struggling with finding sustainable approaches, or want to design the nutrition blueprint to fit your life, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. That's what we're here for, and we would be more than happy to help you do that.
Absolutely.
So in the meantime, I will do my usual reminder of please don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to this podcast for new episodes coming out every single Monday in your feed. You will see Paris and I catching up on a regular basis, so don't miss out on the next one. And if you do have any topics that you want us to cover off, drop a comment below. Let us know what you thought of this one. If you're in the comments already, we'd love to hear.
Thanks for watching, everybody, or listening. Really, it does mean a lot to us because Courtney puts a lot of effort into editing these videos, and obviously we want to give you guys as much value. So share with a friend. There's lots of people that could hopefully get something to take away from at least one of these episodes, I would hope. So share it with your people.
We would really appreciate your help in spreading the thought process, spreading the perspectives, helping people feel more comfortable and supported along their fitness journey. So if you have a friend you think could use the support, and one of the episodes we've covered so far really helps to address one of their key pain points, please do send it along. All right, everybody. With that, I think we'll leave you for this week. Bye for now.
Bye.